Okay, I want to take you through the 3 source questions you've done for homework over the last week or so, the 2 inference 6-mark questions, and the 1 purpose 8-mark question. So let's have a look at the first one then. Here's your source A. Get rid of that. Source A is from Millicent Fawcett then, and she said this: "The violence offered by the suffragettes has not been formidable," so that means it's not strong, "and the fiercest of the suffragettes have been far more ready to suffer pain than to inflict it. What those endured who underwent the hunger strikes and the anguish of force feeding can hardly be overestimated. Their courage made a deep impression on the public." So, according to the mark scheme which you have in your book then, which is right here, for 6 marks, you must make 2 supported inferences. Alright, supported. Now that means you cannot just go and pick something out or just say what you mean. You have to take something directly from the source and then say what it means. So it's those examples, like you do in any kind of essay. You've got to have an example. You can't just make something up, even if you're right. Okay, even if you're right. So let's have a look at what we can actually pick out then. If I were you, I'd look at this and I'd think, right, violence offered by the suffragettes has not been formidable, and the fiercest of suffragettes have been far more ready to suffer pain than to inflict it. Now, she seems to be suggesting there that actually the violence is not a big problem. It's that actually they are treated very badly in this cat and mouse act. Now remember, you don't need your own knowledge, but that's something you might be thinking about. So there's one right there. Okay. Secondly then, you might look at this bit here where it says, "Their courage has made a deep impression on the public." Now you might also think, well, hang on a second, I've seen other sources and some of them seem to suggest that actually women who were suffragettes were ugly, were stupid, were ignorant, in some cases were violent, like the second source you're about to see. So I think we've got 2 possible inferences there. What we need to do then is actually have a better look at them and see what they imply. What do they mean? So, I've said this then. In source A, Millicent Fawcett suggests that suffragettes have been treated harshly in comparison to their own actions. She states that, whoa, hang on a second, she states that I must be making an actual supported inference here. She states that the suffragettes were ready to suffer pain. Now, ready to suffer pain, there is the bit which actually is my example, isn't it? Okay, so I've made an inference here, and then I've supported it. Let's carry on. As opposed to being violent themselves. Fawcett also implies, great word, that the public consider hunger strikes to be a courageous action, stating that this made a deep impression on the public. Where it says that, there we go. I can also infer, this is fantastic, Mr. French, A star I think. I can also infer that Fawcett thinks this might be in spite, so against, of how suffragettes have been portrayed in the media. This is then 6 marks. It's 6 marks because we've actually got 2 supported inferences. Okay, right here, 2 supported inferences. So that then is a 6-mark answer. Right, so let's have a look at the second one you had to do then. Source B. This is the one that a lot of people should get rightly angry at, I think. "The recruiting field for the militant suffragettes is the million of our excess female population. That million which had better long ago have long gone to mate with its complement of men beyond the sea." Now, we suggested that that might suggest Australia, okay, as something to do with the fact that lots of men and women and children were sent to Australia during the 1700s and 1800s. So it's suggesting sort of criminality here, which is quite extreme. It then says, "These are sexually embittered women, they're angry. Peace will return when every woman comes to recognise that she can, without sacrifice of dignity, give a willing subordination to her husband or father who, when all is said and done, earn the money for her." Okay, when women come to recognise, when they wake up This is particularly aggressive against women. So, let's have a look what I've written. My answer is this then. In source B, the journalist is quite clearly anti-female suffrage. That's pretty obvious, isn't it? There is my first inference. And I've supported it with an actual quote from the piece, all right, which you need to do, don't you? Okay, that you need to do it. Secondly then, male dominance at the violence of the suffragettes will cease. This also suggests that, right, so immediately then, this also suggests that there's a second inference right there, that women will return to, in his opinion, their rightful place under a husband's watch. The journalist also suggests that suffragettes are descendants of women who should have long been deported to Australia. So there's another inference. Brilliant, fantastic. So suggests, here it is. During the previous century, alongside male criminals, beyond the sea. Okay, and I've actually picked out again, okay, beyond the sea. It's very, very clear to us. This also implies that the Times was strongly anti-female suffrage and conservative. That's 6 marks. Now, a couple of little things about this. Firstly, I've used the word journalist because it's a journalist. It's not an author, it's a journalist. So be specific. That's who this person is. See, writer, use a specific word. Secondly, notice I've used the word conservative, but I've used a small c. Okay, a big C is to do with the actual political party. A small c is somebody who has traditional views. Doesn't necessarily mean they vote for the Conservative Party. Right? May well, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. So there's a 6 mark answer again, so that's 2. Lastly then, we're going to look at the purpose question. Study source A and use your own knowledge. What's the purpose of this poster? Use details from the poster and your own knowledge to explain your answer. So you have to do both, okay? You cannot just do one thing. Let's have a look then. A Liberal election poster, 1910. Remember that this is actually important. This does mean something. You can use this. This is part of the actual source. Right. So in the poster, the workers' emancipation. Emancipation means like freedom, okay, being free. The workers' emancipation. So immediately, this must be aimed at people who are working class, okay. And so that tells us about its audience. That tells us about its purpose. All right. This isn't aimed at people who already have money. Secondly, then, let's look at what we've got. It seems to be split into 2 things here. So our first section is this one up here. It is rather hard that an old man should have to find his way to the gates of the tomb, bleeding and footsore through the brambles and thorns of poverty. Now let's have a look what we've got. We have gravestones. We have somebody with a walking stick, which suggests they've had a hard life. This lady here suggests that she's probably his wife. They are walking together through brambles and thorns that look dead to the workhouse. Notice it's also very grey. So it suggests they've had a hard life. It suggests he's going to die. It suggests it's going to be a very sad existence and one that's very lonely. Also, from your own knowledge, you know now that the workhouse was not a place people wanted to go. The workhouse was a place where people were treated very, very harshly. There was a lot of discipline. They were often run by local charities, usually religious charities who had their own views on why people were poor. That was generally because it was thought that they had been lazy. Right? We wouldn't think that now, but at the turn of the century, that's what was thought. And these workhouses often relied on the charity of groups such as Barnardo's or the Salvation Army in order to provide perhaps a better existence. Okay, so that's what the current situation is in around 1905 to 1910. But then we've got this second sort of image here. So let's have a greater look at this then. So firstly, it's much more colourful, isn't it? We have a sunset, which suggests that life is coming to a close, but the sunset's quite vibrant. We have lots of life. So we have not only these people here, probably the grandchildren, but the daughter is also, she's got her own pram, which suggests that the grandchild, suggests that she one day will have a daughter as well. So life will continue. We've also got all these crops here. So that's suggesting growth and life again, and food and fulfillment and nourishment. That is in complete contrast to this one up here, isn't it? Complete contrast. They're very, very different. Look what it says here from the National Liberal Club in London. It says, "We are cutting a new path, a longer one, a longer and easier, a pleasanter one, through fields of waving corn." The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Limehouse, July the 30th. So it seems to be very, very different. And the message is clearly, look, a vote for the Liberal Party will get you this here. This is what everyone wants. Now I've asked you to do two things. Not only look at what the point is, but also what does it want to achieve. So it wants you to vote for the Liberals. Now let's look at the mark scheme. So to get top marks then, you have to look at the content and the context. You must have your own knowledge, all right? Own knowledge is vital to get those top marks. You've got to explain what it's saying, but also what it wants to achieve, what it wants you to do. There you go, what it wants you to do. You also need to analyse what it calls the treatment of the source. Now that's exam speak, and what that basically means is you need to explain how the source is shown, not just the message, but how it's shown. So we've already seen then that you've got gravestones and dead brambles in one corner. In the other corner you have that sunset, but it's quite vibrant. That you have the grandchildren, you have the grandchild with her pram, which shows life. You have the crops, life. You can see there's happiness there. You've got to pick out particular details which explain that. So this is my answer then. Let's have a look what I've written. Get rid of that. Here we go. Source A was produced in order to persuade poorer people and the older generation that a vote for the Liberals would be a vote for an easier life in which the government would support them. Immediately then, I've said what the purpose is. I've answered the question straight away. Okay, I've answered it straight away. The poster shows two possible futures. One is grey and shows death in the form of the gravestones and dying shrubbery. So there I'm talking about the treatment. All right, that's the treatment. So that's your sort of level 3. Whilst the other is full of colour and life, which is depicted through the growing crops and vibrant sunset. So notice that I'm saying that it's full of colour and life, but then I'm picking out an actual example. Okay, so I'm supporting what I'm saying with an example. The latter is a future envisaged by the Liberals, whilst the former is the current promoted by the Conservative politicians. Both also show people. Alright, so there's another example. Both also show people. The upper left shows an elderly couple who are struggling to even make it to the workhouse, such as the man's physical pain as shown in his stoop. So, physical pain shown in his stoop. This suggests that, and I suppose I could have talked about the walking stick there, this suggests that life has been harsh and difficult. Right, harsh and difficult. So I'm making an inference there in order to work out what the purpose is. Now I'm going to use a bit of context, alright? So I've got to get that context in, remember. Workhouses were a last resort for the poor as conditions were often tough and harsh. Although there were many charities such as Bernardo's, these were not sponsored by the government and so relied on donations from philanthropists. Great word we used the other day. Use it, it's a brilliant word, it makes you look really clever. That then tells us that I've answered the question, so I'm on a level 3 again. Brilliant. The other couple are clearly much better off. Right, there's my inference. Thanks to Lloyd George's reform. And there's my context. Oh, this is fantastic again. It's almost like I know how to answer this. Thanks to Lloyd George's reforms. A pension could be collected from 70 years old and might help provide for retirement and leisure activities with the grandchildren, as this image suggests. And there's another inference. Overall then, the poster implies that old age will be better with the Liberals' old age pensions. It also wants the viewer to keep voting Liberal to ensure this happens. Level 3, 8 out of 8. And there you go.